Hey everybody, Mike here with Delta Faucet. Today I'm going to show you how to install Delta Faucet's direct-to-stud shower wall set. Now if you're considering installing a complete corner shower set, check out our how to prepare video that will walk you through product compatibility and how to prepare your space. Before installing your wall set, you need to have already installed your shower base. If you did that with no trouble, then the wall set install should go pretty smooth too. But if at any point along the way you feel a step is a little bit beyond your abilities, I definitely recommend contacting a professional for some additional help. You should also know that there are some steps along the way where you're going to need to allow curing time for adhesives and sealant. Using these properly is very important, so please don't rush through those sections. Allow ample time for curing based on the manufacturer's recommendation. Now, Delta Faucet also shows a list of recommended adhesives and sealants in the installation guide that comes with your product. Okay, a few things to consider before beginning installation. You may want to be sure that the model of your wall set will fit in the intended location, so make sure you check the size of your opening. Some other things to consider. How will the door to your enclosure open? Make sure it works with the configuration of your bathroom. And take the time to think through where your plumbing fixtures are located relative to your shower components. Now the door to my enclosure here is going to be opening from the left to the right. Therefore, I probably want to have all of my plumbing components on this left-hand wall here. That way it makes it a little easier for me to reach in to the trim to turn on the water and warm things up without having the water either spray on me or out the door. So it's a great idea to go ahead and make any of those necessary plumbing adjustments before we install this wall set while you still have full access to the framing and plumbing behind the walls, because once this goes up, all that access is lost. Now if everything's looking good, let's grab some tools and get started. You're going to need a drill and extension bit holder, a 3/16" drill bit, a driver bit, some safety glasses, a caulk gun with adhesive and sealant, a level, a Carpenters Square, some shims, a drop cloth, some gloves, a tape measure, pencil, utility knife, a screwdriver, construction screws that are 2.5 inches long, screws that are 1.5 inches long and pan head, and a hole saw. So here we are at the location we'll be installing our wall set. You'll notice I've put a piece of cardboard down in the bottom of my shower base. I'm going to be working inside of it, and I don't want to drop a tool or scuff it with my boots or cause any damage, so I've got that protected. Lastly, I want to double check to make sure my opening is level, plumb, and square. So to do that, I'm going to use my level, placing it horizontally along the top of my shower base decks. Then I'm going to hold it vertically along each of my framing members around my opening to confirm they're plumb. And then lastly, I'm going to use a Carpenter Square, holding it tight in the back corner just to confirm that the two walls are square to each other. I'm going to take my level here, and I'm going to place it horizontally along the deck of my shower base, not along the flange. I'm going to check each side, just confirming that everything looks nice and level on the base. All right, that looks great. Next, I'm going to take my level, holding it vertically this time. I want to place it tight against each one of my framing members all the way around my opening, to confirm that each one is perfectly plumb. Those look good. I'm going to continue that all the way around. Then finally, I'm going to use my Carpenter Square here to confirm that the two walls are square with each other. And to do this, I'm just going to hold the square tight into the back corner, and I'm looking to make sure that I'm getting good even contact along each edge of my square. Now, my opening here looks pretty good, level, plumb, and square. However, if yours at home was a little bit off, that's totally fine. We're going to want to make any fine-tune adjustments at this point to try to get that as close as possible, because for one, this is really going to be our last opportunity to do so, and two, it's going to save some headaches down the road. So go ahead and make those adjustments as necessary. Once everything looks good, come back here, and we'll move on to the framing. Now we can move on to our framing. Now you'll notice I've added some additional framing to my opening according to the diagram shown in my instruction manual. Once you've got that added, we're going to be adding 2 additional pieces that are going to help support our shower door down the road. So what I've done is cut 2 2x4s to 68 inches in length. Then I've made a reference line at the top and the bottom that's 7/8 of an inch in from this leading edge here. Now these are going to be mounted to the back side of my double framing here like this, and they need to be 6 inches off subfloor. So we're going to come down low. I'm going to use my tape measure to measure up 6 inches off subfloor. Now again, this is very important. I want to make sure I'm coming off subfloor, not off my top of my bottom plate or anything like that, making sure I'm getting right to the bottom of that shower base. And I'm going to make a reference line right at 6 inches. All right. So now I've got that mark that's going to indicate where the bottom of my nailer needs to go. So once I've got that, I can grab my pre-cut nailer here. I'm going to hold it to the inside, again, of that double framing. That's towards the shower side. And I want to make sure the bottom is right at 6 inches and then also that it's sticking out 7/8 of an inch, again using those marks I made previously as a reference line. So now I'm going to secure this in place using either screws or nails. Once I get this one side in, I'm going to repeat the same exact steps for the other side, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. All right, so I've got both of my additional framing pieces installed here, and I want to take a moment just to double check to make sure that I'm 6 inches off the subfloor to the bottom, and then also offset from my existing framing 7/8 of an inch. Once everything looks good, I can move on to the next step of determining the center point of the hole I have to cut in my side panel to accommodate my mixing valve here. Now this is a very important hole to get correct because once we cut the hole, we can't uncut the hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a horizontal measurement and a vertical measurement to determine the center point of the hole itself, and transfer these to a cardboard template I'm going to make in a second. And that way I can test fit the template first to confirm that I have the exact right dimensions, make any adjustments necessary before I transfer those to my actual panel and cut that hole. Again, we can't uncut. So the first thing I'm going to do, there's a couple different ways we can do this, but what I think is the easiest way is to take your level again. I'm going to hold it at the center point of my mixing valve here where I have to cut that hole. Then I'm going to make sure that I'm perfectly plumb down to my shower base here. Once I've got it right where I want it, I'm going to take my pencil and make a little light reference line at the top of the shower base. Then I'm going to take my tape measure. I'm going to measure from the very front edge of my shower base here. You'll see there's a little bit of a radius at the top, so I want to make sure I'm measuring from that vertical flat surface to that reference line I just marked, and then I'm going to make note of that dimension. That's my horizontal dimension to the center point of that hole I have to cut. Next, I'm going to do my vertical dimension. I want to make sure I'm holding my tape measure, again, right on that little plumb line that I marked, and then bring it right up to the center point of that hole. Make note of that dimension. And now I have my horizontal and my vertical center point of where that hole needs to be drilled. I'm going to go ahead and cut a cardboard template that I'll show you in a second, transfer those measurements to there, and then we'll move on to the test fit. All right, so here I have my cardboard template. Now there's a couple things I want to point out before we move on. The first is you'll see I put a big arrow on it so I indicate not only which way is up, but also which side is front. This is very important so I make sure I'm transferring my measurements correctly onto my template. Second, I need to make sure that I have 2 straight edges along the bottom and along the front, that's the side outside of my shower enclosure, that they're not only perfectly straight, but also that they're at a right angle in the corner, AKA perfectly square. So what I've done is I actually cut this corner off of the box from my packaging material to make sure that I've got that perfectly square and straight along those 2 edges. So I transferred my horizontal measurement over to the middle, made a mark, then from my bottom here, my vertical measurement up, found the intersection of those 2 points, and then cut a hole that was big enough to accommodate my mixing valve. Now once I have that all cut, I'm going to take my template. All right, so I'm going to hold this template in place, and what I'm looking for here is I want to make sure that I have a nice flat edge between the flat spot of my shower base and the front edge of my template. After I've got that, I'm going to check the hole location, which mine looks perfect. So what this has done, it's confirmed that I've got the correct horizontal and vertical measurements that I now can transfer to my side panel and then get that hole cut. Now I can start transferring those horizontal and vertical measurements onto our side panel. So the first thing I've done is made sure I'm going to be working on the correct side panel, be it the left or the right, for the one I need to cut the hole into. You'll see I've got it face up on the ground here, and I put an extra piece of 2x material underneath the position of where I'll be drilling the hole, not only to help support it, but also to help protect the floor underneath. Now to make this measurement, I'm going to confirm which side is the bottom side and which side is the front side here, the leading edge, and I'm going to measure off those 2 points. So for my horizontal measurement first, I want to point out that I'm measuring off the flat spot here of the panel, not off the edge of the flange, but off this leading edge flat here. I pull that up across, make a mark for that horizontal measurement. And then for the vertical measurement, I'm going to measure right off the bottom edge. Again, coming up to the center point, marking that vertical location. So now what I've done is I've got an X that's going to mark the center point of that hole I need to drill into my side panel. Once you get that done, we're going to go ahead and test fit it into place. Now that I have my hole cut, I'm going to stand my panel up and turn it around so now I'm looking at the back side. And we're going to apply this fire retardant pad directly over the center of that hole. Now the pad has 2 sides of adhesive on it. I think it's easiest to peel off one side of the adhesive and kind of use that to guide yourself to make sure you're getting it as centered on the hole as possible. Peel off the other side. And I want to press this firmly against my panel, making sure I have good adhesion all the way corner to corner. Now, you'll notice that I've obviously covered my hole, so the last step is to take my utility knife and then work my way around that hole, cutting out the material in the center to fully expose that mixing valve hole that I cut earlier. Now, to cut out this material in the middle of the hole, I think it's easiest to kind of make a cross from side to side and then work out each quarter, if you will, all the way around. So I'm going to kind of feel where the hole starts. Make an X from one side to the other. And then I can use my knife and work my way around the hole itself. All right, now I've got that hole fully cut out. We can move on to the next step. Next, we're going to start bolting our two side panels together. I'm going to talk you through this first before I do it to kind of show you how this is all going to work. The first thing I'm going to do is apply a bead of sealant from the very top of the shorter side panel, right behind the holes here, all the way top to the bottom. Once I have that on, I'm going to flip this panel around, and you'll see how it fits together kind of in this L channel of the larger panel. They're going to sit together just like this. And I know I've got them in the right spot because these little holes will line up with one another. Now, once I've got this in place, I'm going to bolt it together at the 4 locations, 1, 2, 3, 4, using the included nuts and bolts. I'm going to use a nut with a washer over the end of it. And a little bit of a pro tip here is I think it's easier to bring the nut in from the side that's kind of cupped. It's a little easier to get a screwdriver on. Through the back, make sure I'm lined up correctly. And then on the back side, I'm going to do another washer, like this. And then finally, the nut on the very end. I'm going to repeat the same exact steps for each one of the 4 locations, top to bottom. So again, sealant, bring it together, and then go ahead and add your nuts and bolts all the way down. Now that we have our wall set assembled, I've dry fit it into place to see how everything's coming together. Now there's 3 things I'm going to check for here. The first is I want to make sure my wall set is sitting along the deck of my shower base all the way around. Second, I want to make sure that this flat leading edge of my wall set is even with the flat edge of the base down below. And then lastly, I want to make sure that this edge is perfectly plumb. So I'm going to take my level, hold it tight to that edge there, and then make any minor adjustments necessary to ensure that it's sitting perfectly plumb on the wall. Next, we're going to start making some reference marks for some pilot holes that we're going to drill in the next step. So to begin, I'm going to mark 5 marks down the leading edge flange here on each side. I'm going to start with 1 at the top, 1 in the middle, 1 down at the bottom. I'm going to split the difference between each one, and that will give me 5 roughly equidistant between each other. Also, I want to mark all of my framing stud locations around the top flange here. I want to make a mark in the center of each of my vertical framing locations all the way around my opening. And then lastly, I want to make sure I do a horizontal line just along the top of my wall set, again, all the way around the opening, because that will help indicate how high the wall set's sitting on my framing. Once I've done that, I can pull this wall set back out and start drilling some pilot holes. Next, we're going to start drilling our pilot holes. So the first thing I've done is to bring my wall set away from my vertical framing because I want to make sure I'm only drilling these through the flange and not into the wood behind it. Next, I'm going to be using a 3/16" drill bit to do this, and you'll see I've also got a drill bit extender on here because I want to make sure that I'm not going to have the spinning chuck of the drill contact the wall set when I do this because that could cause a little bit of damage. So once you get your drill ready to go, we're going to go ahead and drill each pilot hole at each one of our marked locations around the entire wall set, then come back here and we'll move on to the next step. Next, we're going to move on to applying adhesives and sealants to our opening. So I've moved my wall set out of the way, and I'm going to be applying adhesive to each one of my vertical framing members here, all the way down from the top of my shower base, right to the top of that reference line that I marked earlier. Also, I'm going to be applying sealant to the junction between my shower base and the wall set where they come together. Now, this is an important distinction that I might be using 2 different materials here, adhesive on the walls and sealant on the junction between the shower base and the wall set. Now, if you check your packing materials, there will be a card in there that actually lists each material that's approved for both uses, one of which I'm using today. So just double check that card to see if you need to use one material or two. Then we can go ahead and start applying the adhesive to the walls and the sealant down along the tub base. So to apply this to the wall, I'm going to make sure I do a nice thick bead, stretching from the floor all the way up, right to the bottom of that reference line I made earlier. And I'm going to do this all the way around the opening at every framing location that will be covered by my wall set. And one thing I want to make sure I also hit is this extra piece of framing that I added at one of the early steps. Okay, now I'm going to complete the same steps at each one of my vertical framing all the way around my opening. Now for the sealant portion, down along the junction between my shower base and my wall set, I'm going to apply it right to the back edge of this flange here. So I want to make sure that I'm, again, doing a nice, even, consistent bead. Right along the back edge where that wall set's going to contact my shower base. All right, now that I have my adhesive and my sealant in place, I'm going to grab my wall set and place it back into my opening. All right, now that I have my wall set in place, we can start moving around and securing our wall set to the wall using screws through those pilot holes that we drilled in the previous step. Now, before I do that, I think it's a great idea just to double check those same three things that we check when we dry fit the wall set. First, making sure that I'm getting good contact between the shower base and the deck and the wall set. Second, I want to make sure that the leading edge of my wall set is perfectly aligned with the leading edge of the base down below it. And then third, and probably most importantly, just confirming that this wall set is sitting perfectly plumb on the wall. Now, once all three of those things look good, we're going to start by screwing this to the wall, but I want to talk about the screws briefly. The screws I'm using are 1.5 inches long and they're pan head. Now, it's very important that they're pan head because when I screw through the flange, it's going to make sure that I'm not putting any undue stress on the flange that could cause it to crack or be damaged in some other way. Second, my drill. I've got the appropriate driver bit on here. And again, just like when I drilled the pilot holes, I've got a driver bit extender just to give a little bit of added security, making sure that the drill chuck isn't going to contact our wall set when we're going and working around securing it to the walls. And then lastly, when I get up to the top here, if I have any gaps between my flange and the vertical framing behind it of greater than, say, like 1/8 of an inch, I want to make sure I'm using a wood shim, dropping it back down behind the flange. I want to drop that wood shim down there to help close that gap between the flange and the vertical frame behind it. Again, just to make sure that it's not going to cause any damage when I tighten it up. So, once you've got everything ready to go, we're going to work our way around the opening, securing that flange to the wood framing with those screws. Okay, I've got my wall set all in place with those screws, and now I can let that adhesive fully cure. And that about wraps things up for the installation of the wall set. There is one more thing I want to point out, and that's once our remodels come to a close here, I want to make sure I add a bead of finish sealant to the joint between my shower base and my wall set, all the way around the bottom, and then also to the joint between my two wall panels, all the way from the bottom to the very top. That'll help ensure a nice watertight seal. If you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to Delta Faucet's customer service team. They're more than happy to help.